So this is the 9.9 Evinrude my son brought home. It's like 37-year-old engine. Didn't really think much of it at the time. It was pretty rough shape. It still doesn't look great, but we've got it running. It actually runs pretty well. But one of the things I noticed is not being real familiar with this, but having a lot of experience with engines and such in the past. A lot of kind of bad information on doing some of the repairs on this engine. The first thing I want to tell you is, if you need to get the flywheel off, you need to be really careful, okay? And you need to do it properly, or you could damage the end of the crankshaft, break the flywheel. And I can tell you, any part that you need to order for this engine, although most of them are available, you'll pay dearly for it. Now, my son paid $100 for this entire engine, and I thought he was nuts at the time. But we did find a few problems. The first thing I did check, probably a good tip for you if you're looking at an old engine, make sure it has some you can feel compression in it. So that's the resistance when the pistons come up and the compression stroke. If it spins real freely, now this one's got good compression, pretty good compression for as old as it is. But if it doesn't have any compression, you know what, it's probably not worth messing with, because everything that you do is going to be very costly. So that's just how I feel about it. So anyhow, to get the flywheel off, now you could put a socket on there and a wrench, try and do it this way, but you have to secure this flywheel from turning, obviously, to get the nut loose. That's hard to do. You can't really, I don't recommend you try and jam anything in here to try and keep the flywheel from turning. You'll end up damaging something or have problems there. The real thing to use would be one of these little impact drivers. So this is a Milwaukee impact driver. We've got an adapter on there, 7/8 socket, and that way you can just go on here, make sure that's down there really good and up against the nut, and that nut comes off there handily. So once you have that off of there, then you need to use a puller. I mean, I've seen guys with rubber mallets trying to knock this loose. Now this flywheel is sitting on a tapered edge of the shaft, the crankshaft. It's tapered. The reason it's tapered, it's to make sure that it sits perfectly square, won't wobble. So it makes it an integral part of the crankshaft assembly. So to get it off of there, well, since it's a taper, think of it as like a wedge in something, right? Only it's a wedge that goes 360 degrees. So it's on there tight, even with the nut off. It won't just lift off. So you need to use a puller. So if you don't have one of these, and I know there's a lot of guys that wouldn't have one sitting around, a lot of the part stores have them available for loaners. Or you can buy one here. I think I saw one of these. Now this is a Mac. It's probably kind of expensive, but you can get inexpensive ones especially for a project like this, like Harbor Freight, for probably like $20. So you'll notice there's 3 threaded holes around the peripheral, the perimeter of that center crankshaft bolt. And those are 1/4 20. It's 1/4-inch bolt, 20 thread per inch, quarter national course, I guess you'd call it. And just make sure you put the 3 screws there. It's really hot out here, and I'm trying to do this quickly. So just make sure you have the bolts long enough so that they engage at least 3/4 of an inch down into the threads, because the last thing you want to do is pull the threads out of the flywheel. Then you're really in trouble, because now you got no way to get the flywheel off without totally destroying it. So the way this works is you just secure those down. Now that holds on this crow's foot, I guess you'd call it, is going to be clamped onto the flywheel, and then we're going to push with this center bolt, pushes against the end of the crankshaft, and it'll lift that off of that taper. Now try and get these in relatively evenly. so that it pushes down square. And I did put a little dab of grease on the end of the tip of this before we started. So then you just take a wrench and you just crank it like this around a couple of times, and it just popped. It just popped right off of the taper there. So you pull that off of there. That's what you got. That's the flywheel. Now it's exposed the electronics. This is your trigger for the ignition. This is the magneto. And I'm going to go over some of this stuff later as well, including repairing the recoil, because there seems to be a lot of problems with people doing that too. Anyway, that's how you do it properly. It's a good engine. It's worth taking the time, having the tools ready ahead of time, and it'll give you a lot of life. Anyways, that's what I got for today.